It is time to touch our bags and drop our sack on this edition of Seattle Seahawks Today. It is mailbag time, our reaction to mandatory minicamp. We will answer all of your questions on your Seattle Seahawks as we're talking JSN. I'm sure we're going to be talking about what's going on in the cornerback position, some injuries, some different things to get to. We will answer all your questions and more coming up in just a matter of moments. Tyler Jones here with you. Thanks for joining us. And I need a favor from you, folks. I need to make sure not only that you're subscribed to Seahawks Today, but you're also part of what we call the Noti gang around here. Those are the folks that have their notifications turned on. That way, they never miss a moment. When we bring you new content here on the channel, you're notified immediately when that content's up, whether that's our daily videos, whether it's our live shows twice a week, maybe it's breaking news. Could be at midnight, I'm at home, bring you a video as quick as we can, whatever it may be. You got to have your notifications turned on. That way, you stay alert what's happening with your Seattle Seahawks. Join the Noti gang, type Noti gang in the comments for a shout-out on a future edition of Seahawks Today, and we'll get started with today's show. Caleb writes in with a $10 super chat. What's the biggest need to watch for offensive line or linebacker spots? So, Caleb, about 3 weeks ago, my answer would have been the offensive line with the many concerns that there are there. You have an older guy in Laken Tomlinson. We'll see if he still has anything left in the tank. Olu Owatimi, his second year, moves into the role of starter. How well is he going to perform? The right guard competition, which seems to be favoring Christian Haynes at this point. Anthony Bradford's hurt at the moment. And then Abraham Lucas, we'll see if he is fully healthy come training camp and all that after the knee surgery, if that's a lingering issue or not. But fast forward to today, and you have Terrell Dodson now banged up. We've heard he's supposed to be back in time for training camp. Jerome Baker has been nowhere to be seen. Remember, he failed his physical with the Dolphins before he got released, and he comes to Seattle off of that wrist injury, the lower body injuries that he suffered there in Miami. It's not looking great for Dodson, but they expect him to be back in time for training camp as well. But even beyond that, just those two, you have a lack of depth at this position. So right now, the biggest thing to watch, I think, is the linebacker position, because of the recent events that have unfolded, but both of them are very concerning. Caleb, thanks for the question. Thanks for the super chat. Beta YT2 with a $10 super chat writes in. Hashtag Seahawks, do you think we'll make the postseason? I don't know, Jim. Let's look back at the last 2 years. The Seahawks finished 9-8 in both 2022 and in 2023. In 22, that was enough to get in the postseason with a tiebreaker over the Lions. And then last year, they just missed as the tiebreaker went to the Green Bay Packers. And the Packers got in. Ultimately, they ended up beating the Dallas Cowboys, almost beat the Niners in the divisional round. So if you go 9-8 again, then you're close, right? The NFC, I think, is weaker than the AFC, so that helps. We'll take every advantage we can get. I lean towards no right now because there's a lot that remains unknown with this Seahawks team. How many linebackers are you going to have when the season begins? Are those guys actually going to be healthy? Who's starting on the offensive line? How does this team adapt to a new offensive and defensive system? I have too many questions right now to confidently say that this team's going to make the postseason. Now, my mind could change, but right now I lean towards no. I hope I'm wrong, though. Will Ferrell writes in, when's the last good movie Will Ferrell made? It's been a while. He had that great run in the 2000s of those comedy movies, and he's just fallen off the face of the earth ever since. Let's ask you this. Will Ferrell wants to know, what should the realistic expectation for JSN be this year? I think there's no reason why JSN can't be second on this team in receiving yards. Think about this. Here's a little bit of perspective for the folks at home. JSN had a total of 63 catches last year. That was only 3 catches less than DK Metcalf did. All right? You got to think his targets are going to go up. We heard in OTAs that he was Geno Smith's favorite target to work with. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic that JSN's going to have a huge year this year. I think he's going to pass up Tyler Lockett as the number 2 receiver on this depth chart. I think at a minimum, 800 yards is possible. I think that at best he can go over 1,000 potentially. I think JSN is due for a big year with this Seahawks offense. I'm all in. Can he lead the Seahawks in receiving, though? What do you guys think? Is that possible for Jaxon Smith-Njigba? You got 2 options here. Type Y for yes, in for no. Weigh in on our pinned comment today and let us know what you think if JSN will lead the Seahawks in receiving. Just Life wants to know, how many yards do you think Kenneth Walker will have? Well, what we've seen through 2 years from Kenneth Walker is an 1,000-yard season his rookie season. And then in his second season, he had about 900. And he got banged up in both years, right? Did not play the full season either year. I don't think that, realistically speaking, Kenneth Walker is going to play all 17 games. And he is going to share some of the workload with Zach Charbonnet, and the Seahawks are expected to throw the football more in this air raid scheme under Ryan Grubb. But even with that said, I think that there's no reason why, with an improved offensive line, that Kenneth Walker shouldn't take a step forward. I think another 1,000-yard season is certainly capable for Kenneth Walker. I think that should be the goal, the mindset. Get over 1,000 yards, and I'll be very pleased. Thanks for the question, Just Life. Daniel writes in, do you think P.J. Walker can beat out Sam Howell for the QB2 spot? Daniel, thanks for that question. P.J. Walker, the short answer is no. P.J. Walker, I think realistically, what you're hoping for if you're P.J. Walker is that you play well enough in minicamp and in these off-season workouts, training camp and all that, that you can prove to yourself that you belong in a role of some sorts, whether that's the practice squad or play really good enough to be number 3, and the Seahawks say to themselves, we can't afford to lose this guy. He needs to be on our active roster, our 53-man roster. That, if you're P.J. Walker, that should be the goal in mind. They've invested too much into Sam Howell for him not to be the number 2 quarterback. Geno Smith's not going anywhere either. That's what you're looking at if you're P.J. Walker, is you try to be that number 3 quarterbacks, go ahead and lock down that spot and prove that you deserve to stick around. I think that's realistic here for P.J. Walker. Jack Daniels writes in. I love me some Jack Daniels. I could use some Jack Daniels right now. With Reek and Witherspoon holding their spots at corner, who wins the other outside corner job? Jack, great question. Reek going to be one of your starting outside corners. Witherspoon expected to be your starting nickelback. So that leaves 2 options. Mike Jackson and Tre Brown as your potential starting outside corner opposite of Raiqwon. And you look at the statistics in 2023, they were very similar between these two. Although Tre Brown played in 2 last games, they had the same amount of tackles for loss, pass breakups edge towards Tre Brown, and the interceptions edge towards Tre Brown as well. I like Tre Brown a little bit more than I do Mike Jackson. We saw Mike Jackson play really well in 2022, but then after struggling in the preseason and in training camp last year, ultimately lost his job to Tre Brown. I think what the difference is between these two, Tre Brown is more likely to have that big one-off game every now and then. Mike Jackson is going to be consistent in just who he is. With Tre Brown, you get the good and the bad. With Mike Jackson, you just kind of get the same thing over and over again. I'll take my chance with Tre Brown. I like Tre Brown a little more than Mike Jackson, but the talk around Seahawks circles is that Mike Jackson has a slight edge at this point. We'll see. Who is the corner you rather roll with, Tre Brown or Mike Jackson? Type MJ for Mike Jackson. Type Tre for Tre Brown. Let us know in the comments section below. Nick Fury writes in, hashtag Seahawks, hashtag Papa Seahawk. I've been doing this show over 2 years, and y'all are still calling me Papa. I mean, like, I don't know why that is. I'm not a father. I'm not a husband. But you know what? I guess you're all my children, one way or another. What are the best linebacker free agents right now? Great question. Let's pull this up in real time, folks. I can tell you this right now, before even looking, there's not a ton of options there for the Seahawks to work with, and they don't have much money to spend. But as I pull this up, let's go ahead and go over this list for you of linebackers that are out there right now. Shaq Leonard is still available. Zach Cunningham, Josh Woods. Shaq Leonard is a possibility. I wouldn't mind Shaq Leonard. I would be surprised if they did sign him, but we've seen crazier things before. We'll keep that in mind. But if Shaq Leonard remains available, who knows? Maybe he does end up in Seattle. Thanks for joining us here on this edition of Seattle Seahawks Today. For continuing Seahawks offseason coverage, subscribe to the channel now, youtube.com/SeahawksTV.